We'll go ahead and get started. I'll give my introduction in just a half a second, but we will have two additional speakers. We have Becky Curtis, Director of Programs and Partnerships with the C&O Canal Trust. And we have Charlie Stek, the Chair of the Mallows Potomac Partnership. And what we're talking about today is how we can use recreation and preservation together to make a better product, a better tourism solution, how these pieces join together. So we've got some really great examples. I'm going to start with the slightly broader view and how these pieces fit together. So I'm Aaron Markovich. I'm the Executive Director of Anacostia Trails Heritage Area, one of the 13 heritage areas in the state of Maryland. I've got at least three Heritage Area Directors, 4 Heritage Area people in here today. How many more Heritage Area people? All these Heritage Area type folks. The Heritage Area Program is kind of a unique program in the state of Maryland, and we do have grant money, so if you're looking for grant money and you're not sure if you're in a Heritage Area, you can ask one of the 4 of us and we'll tell you. And my background is I have degrees in historic preservation and public history, and after doing a stint on the island of Nantucket in Massachusetts, I came down here to be at Anacostia Trails, where I have been immersed in some of this trail development process. If you don't know this area very well, there is a very large trail network that connects into Washington, D.C. So right here from campus, you can be on a bike or by foot down to those down to those trails. Now I am not much, I'm into cycling, but not fully into cycling. I actually am a little bit more of a hiker. I've done parts of the Appalachian Trail, a lot of that type of work. So whenever I say trails, if I use cycling, please just allow me. Sometimes those two are interchangeable in my head. When I talk about trails, I'm talking about sort of any types of trails that are out there. And we also will include on-road paths, those types of shared use facilities as well in this. So as we look and talk about historic preservation and trails, the thing that we find is that oftentimes, as many of you may know, preservation and conservation, environmentalism share a lot of the same goals, but we don't end up talking to each other. We don't end up sitting down in the same room and sharing what we are looking for. And what we're finding, especially even today, is that the environments that people are looking for are really aligning. People are looking for those historic communities. They may not say historic, but they're going to say authentic. They're looking for authentic experiences. They're looking for connections between people. How do I get out? How do I meet those people? They're looking for, of course, safe environments as well. Well, those cyclists and trail users are looking for those same experiences. These environments, they overlap. Now, I have been using, especially trails, as economic development. In this particular region, our trails, and we're going to hear about some examples of how long-distance trails are being used for economic development. What I'm interested in is how can we use shorter spans of trails for economic development. Our trails around here tend to be used for commuters getting in and out of D.C., but how can we translate that into cash in the pockets of our local businesses? So looking at these, how trails drive local businesses, we sort of know, for those of us in the preservation world, we know that preservation can be a boon to local economies. It takes a little bit of work. Sometimes trails are a little bit of an easier entree to those that are in local governments whenever you're trying to encourage them. So trails, they attract the visitors, those visitors spend money. And trail users as a population generally will stay longer, spend more, and looking for a higher quality of product. The Great Allegheny Passage is kind of the gold standard, and we'll talk a little bit about what the C&O Canal has been doing and what those users are looking for. But the connections are there. So you can see those types of economic impact. But there's also savings that may not be as obvious right up front. We talk about mode shift. Moving away from automobiles, moving away from those types of things, better air quality, health savings, etc. And of course, the cost of building a trail is much lower than building a new road. So if we can shift people off of those things, they can often mean other types of savings. So there are similar constituencies whenever we're talking about these trails and when we're talking about historic preservation. We know about the advocates, we know about a lot of these different owners, and you may be working with these people in a different context. You may be working with them for, let's say, a business owner. You may be working with them to get a facade grant to help restore the front of their building. But if you know about the trails in the area, you know about the recreational resources in the area, you might be able to say, well, let's make sure that this facade or this new work that you're doing in the front of your building, does it factor in? Is there a water thing, you know, a fountain of some type? Is there a bike rack of some type? Is there a repair station? How can we factor those in so that the people using cycles, those people that might be walking, whatever they might be, are part of that process? We also use similar tactics. We all may know Main Street programs, but Main Street programs aren't dramatically different from some of the basics of a business improvement district. Now, of course, business improvement districts are sort of a self-taxing type of program for those in the community versus a Main Street, which might be more nonprofit type of driven. But those same sorts of concepts can work together. And one of the examples is the Trail Towns program. I'm not going to step on Becky's toes because she's going to tell us a little bit more about how some of that program works, but I am a big fan of that. So we will be coming back to that. So all of those types of programs, they're creating events. Cyclists, trail users, they want events. Preservation, historic communities, they want events. We all want events. We all want to bring people to those places, so we share those types of goals. We all want that security. We all want to make sure that it is a safe place to bicycle or ride. You don't want to have a situation where you are riding into an environment that might seem unfamiliar, and now you're a little bit worried about what you're getting into. You want to have reassurances, and we'll talk a little bit about some of those ways that you can offer that. We all want to have shared maintenance. How can we make the costs a little bit lower? How can we carry the burden across the whole program? So there are also similar rules for the owners. So again, we talk about events, plans, making a destination. Whenever you are thinking about how you can use trails, recreational resources, you can't think about it in terms of, here is a trail. You have to think about it as, where's the trail, where's the trailhead? Think about concentric circles. How far out do you need to go? A cyclist will be induced to come off of a trail user will be induced to come off of them if they know that it is safe, easy to access, there are directional facilities to get there. So they can come to those places. Be creative in adjusting to the users. There are examples of training for business owners and the people that work in those businesses. There are discounts, so on and so forth. And then I like this idea of co-location. The idea of a bike shop and a coffee house in the same type of building, so that the user can get to those types of places. And those are fantastic opportunities for historic buildings. They're funky, they're authentic. So we have Vigilante Coffee Shop in Hyattsville, and it's become a big bike user location because it's funky, it's cool, there's bike parking, although not enough, and all those pieces have come together. So again, similar needs in users. Again, I mentioned kind of older and more wealthy are the demographic for those long trail networks. They're people who have some of that time and that money to do those kinds of things. But they are looking for historic sites. Now, historic sites tend to be fairly low in the tourism, why I'm going to a location. They maybe are at 5 to 10%. But they are still higher than some of the other resources. We may not be as good as going because it's an amusement park, but historic sites can still be just as valuable. And so especially for those that maybe are better educated, maybe they're a little bit more wealthy, a little older, they are looking for those kinds of things. But if we take the flip side of that and look at the younger users, the ones who can't afford the mortgage yet, or whatever it might be, they're looking for a similar type of experience. They just don't know they're looking for a similar type of experience. They're looking for those authentic places. They're looking for the things that are not just another McDonald's. They're looking for something that's authentic where they can meet each other. So both of these kinds of places can meet those users and bring them together. Now, of course, the other thing that trails and corridors can do is often they represent old transportation corridors. We know about rails to trails, but maybe they are stream valleys. Maybe they are different types of access ways, old roads, that sort of thing. And so therefore they have an inherent history to them that can be told. So connecting these historical concepts and locations via these, and that's my daughter there, so I had to make sure she got it. So here's our Vigilante Coffee. You can see that kind of event, that type of program, a lot of seating. There is a food truck at the end of it. This is the hip kind of place that everybody's looking for. The Vigilante Coffee building is an old Model T auto sales building that they renovated through a facade grant from the city of Hyattsville. And did the work inside. And what they started out to do is it was just going to be a roastery. They were just going to roast in there. And people started knocking on the door saying, "Excuse me, can I have a cup of coffee, please?" And suddenly so the first thing they did was they set up a card table, basically to sell coffee out of. And now it has turned into, they actually have, in the front of the building was an accountant at first. The accountant moved out, and they have turned it into a workshop space where they will teach you how to taste coffee correctly. So it has gone the full gamut, and they are now very much plugged into the city of Hyattsville. Just in the distance there where you see the blue tent, that is actually our Heritage Center, our new workshop visitor center space in the city of Hyattsville. So this has become a very vibrant place that is only 1 block away from the trolley train, a converted trolley streetcar line. Here's a couple more examples from our area. This is the new Anacostia River Trail going south towards DC. And here we have one of the boats coming down the river from Bladensburg Waterfront Park giving an explanation of the history of the Anacostia. So along this bridge right here, we have been working to get some interpretive signage as things to be able to stop. The other picture is an image of our bike rally that we hold every year. This is crossing under Adelphi Road, just about to Adelphi Mill. And so we will use those trail rides to connect people with the historic sites in the region. Here's some additional ways to connect. So this upper picture here with all the people in it was our War of 1812 ride. We had a bunch of people who cycled up from DC. They came to Bladensburg Waterfront Park, and we gave them a bike tour. And they were very interested. This is not terribly far from this point to something called Dueling Creek. And so we had trails that made that connection. The trails connected these historic sites from this point, which is approximately the location of the battlefield on the river, over to Dueling Creek, which was then the next line of fighting. This is the trolley tour, where we rode up the trolley trail and looked at sites that were trolley related, so that people had a better connection to it. And then this final picture here, this is actually a developer, the developer of a new property where they've just put in a Whole Foods as part of their agreement on the process was to install these interpretive signs. And the fence behind it is blocking the route of the trolley trail. It has a temporary detour while they finish construction there. But they already have signs for the trolley, Native Americans, Riversdale Mansion, which is nearby. So several things on the property. They've also purchased an airplane that they have mounted on a large pole on the property because it used to be part of an airplane factory. Further inside that property, we actually did just a walking tour of their property, which went from US 1 over to the trails. And this was interesting because it wasn't just a tour of the property, but it was actually an opportunity to bring people who might not be trail users to the trail for them to see what's there. Maybe they weren't a cyclist on a regular basis, but now they see where that trail is going and they can feel safe about it. Bike share is a new and growing thing, and even in your small communities, you not necessarily have to be very urban communities. Bike share can be a unique opportunity. There are small bike share programs such as Zagster. That's a program. You can look up a variety of different bike shares. This program is the Capital Bike Share. It has these sort of large, heavy red bikes, which they're fantastic to ride on, I'll tell you, for as heavy and cumbersome as they look. But they are, that's one opportunity. Now, that is called a docked bike share program, so there's a big dock that needs electricity and you plug it in. But then there are dockless bike shares. There are bike shares that require just a regular bike lockup system because everything is on board. And that can sometimes lead to more people using those connections between the trails, between businesses. And that can be an asset businesses and developers might be looking for in your communities. It doesn't need to be something, it's then a temporary thing or a semi-temporary type of installation that doesn't need to impact the historic nature of certain places. So what can we do? One of the things that has come out of many surveys that Rails to Trails have done, other programs have done, is that we need to educate our businesses. We're often so busy chasing our own tails, just trying to make sure we've got the cash to preserve those buildings. We sometimes forget the business owners and keeping them involved. Especially with trails and recreation, those people may be offering services that you don't know about, or you might be able to offer them grants and programs such as a facade program that they might not know about. And those businesses may not also know the basics of how the trail works. Where can somebody get on? Where can they get food, et cetera, et cetera. We can market together. How can we bring things together? Come to our historic community via trail. Use the old trolley lines to get to these historic communities, et cetera, et cetera. Those are ways that we can bring our own marketing together. One of the things that they've learned is this: business owners don't have the time to come to meetings. They're busy enough running their own darn business. They don't have time to come to your 7 o'clock meeting because they're probably asleep by now. So how can you go to them? What types of resources can you go to them? And I think that is a generally good rule, whether this is recreation or preservation. Those two things can work together. Incentivize things, businesses, how can you use those? One of the big things in terms of trail users is collect that data. You can go to a business and say, we would love for you to offer this service to a recreation user. And then we're going to go, well, I know a couple of friends rode that trail once, but that's all I really know. Is there anybody that even uses that trail? I wouldn't use that trail. Yes, we have 10,000 people who cross that trail every single week. Oh, wait a second. There's 10,000 people passing by my door that I could bring in and offer them a beer? I had no idea. Even if it's 5,000, or even if it's 1,000, that may be more than they're seeing all week. And so suddenly they may need to change how they're looking at things. I like this one: trails are slower than roads, so that you're not going to have 50,000 cars a day, but not all those 50,000 cars stop by. 1,000 really good bike users may be worth more than those 50,000 cars passing by their front door. I also like this, the second one there, that these are economic assets. A lot of times people will see recreational resources as just kind of like, hey, that's cool. We got this thing over here. We're going to do this trail. We got this river. We got this whatever. No, those are driving money to their door. They need to see it that way. So some factors for success: clustering businesses, unique events. Think about those events. Whenever you have an event that's near a trail, do you have bike parking? Do you have a bike valet? Do you have water for them? Do you have lockups? How many of those things do you have in your event? Think about how you can add those. That's been one of the things that I have been doing with our historic sites around here. We have a regular, just to use the Battle of Bladensburg again, we have a regular Battle of Bladensburg encampment at Riversdale Mansion. And it's fantastic. And I said, look, just rope off an area, that's where the bicycles can park. Because they want to know that their bike is not having to park a mile away, tied up to a tree that might get stolen. They may have spent $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 on that bike. They want to know that it's close by. Can they ride in a big group? So we had the National Wildlife Visitor Center up the road, and they basically said, we don't really like bikes riding down our driveway. It's too narrow. The cars will hit them. Hang on. Your site is perfect for bikes. This is the kind of place they want to come to. And so it took a little bit of thinking and how do we rejigger this way of looking at it, and so now it's a more share the road type of solution. So that's some of these watch for physical barriers. How can those bikes get in? How can those cyclists, how can those tourists, not only just accessibility from an ADA standpoint, but also from some of these, do you only have one set of 47 stairs to get to your site or location that a bicyclist can't be there? Could you add a 1-foot piece to the side of the stairs where they can push their bike up that ramp? That might be a simple enough solution. Plenty of parking, water, repair station, and then my personal big issue is wayfinding. If I don't know how to get from that recreational resource to your location, your business, your historic community, what's the point? If I got to figure it out. Sure, a lot of people are using GPS, but if I'm bicycling at 15, 20 miles an hour, and my phone is not here, it's in a package somewhere, whatever, I can't be looking at that. And don't forget about the benefits of paper maps. A lot of times, this is just an aside, a lot of times we sort of go, oh, we'll make an app. We're just going to make an app. An app will solve it. Well, sometimes it does, but a lot of times those cyclists and trail users, they want a paper map just as much as anybody else. They like strapping it down to their bars, and they will use that. So don't look away from paper maps as some types of options. It's up to the user in those cases. So a few examples that you may want to look at. Great Allegheny passes into trail towns. We'll get to a little bit whenever we talk about the C&O Canal. The Indianapolis Cultural Trail, if you haven't heard about that one, is a fantastic thing. This is actually an image from it. This uses trails and art and historic buildings, everything all sort of working together. That is a massive success story in a historic neighborhoods. I'm a really big fan of it, and it is very downtown. It's not urban, it's not suburban or rural oriented. The Katy Trail in Missouri, Delaware and Lehigh National Historic Area. The Virginia Creeper Trail is very cool. Now that's a rural location. In that case, they actually found out that one of the things that they needed to develop was to create something where the buses and the bike carriers would bring everybody to the top of the mountain and drop them off so they could cycle down the mountain. That's what they wanted, was somebody to bring them up to the top. So that's a big thing. That's actually happened on the Great Allegheny Passage as well, basically bringing people to one end and letting them ride the other way. The Island Line in Vermont and the C&O Canal, which we're going to hand off in just a moment. So there's my few thoughts, and we're going to turn it over to Becky from C&O Canal.
Hello everyone, I'm Becky Curtis. I'm the Director of Programs and Partnerships for the C&O Canal Trust. I've been with them for 7 years, and prior to that I was working in environmental education with the Alice Ferguson Foundation, so I come from a nonprofit background. I'm also a hiker, a paddler, a yogi, and a rock climber. That doesn't mean I do any of them well, but as long as you're doing it, you are that. So I like to be a little bit informative, but also this is always a sales pitch. So I do have materials here on all of our programs, including 20% off our Canal Quarters lock houses, special for you today. So if you want to take one on your way out, feel free to. The C&O Canal Trust, we're a 501c3 nonprofit fundraising partner for the C&O Canal National Historical Park. So we raise funds and advocate for preservation and maintenance of the park, and also run programs that enhance the visitor experience. This is our beautiful park. We run from Georgetown in the district all the way out to Cumberland, Maryland, along the Maryland side of the Potomac River. So it's 184.5 very skinny miles of parkland. And the map on the right is our inset of our most popular section in DC and Montgomery County. Most of you that have visited the park have probably visited in that section. So just a little bit of history for those of you that are not familiar with our park. The C&O was an operational canal in the 1800s. It was originally George Washington's grand idea to link the Chesapeake Bay with the Ohio River Valley for commerce. It never made it to the Ohio River Valley, but it did make it to Cumberland, Maryland, and was used for commercial traffic in the 1800s. Unfortunately, a series of disastrous floods, which still occur today, led to its closing in 1924. So luckily now, as of 1971, it is preserved as a national park, and it's an incredible resource. Most important for today to highlight, we have over 1,300 historic structures. That's more than any other single national park unit. And we have 184.5 miles of continuous multi-use trail, our historic towpath, where the canalers would have the mules pull their barges along the canal, is now our multi-use trail. And because of that, we're one of the National Park System's premier parks for trail bicycling. So that's not all. Besides the towpath, we have an incredible array of recreational opportunities. We've got campgrounds, the famous Billy Goat Trail. We have rock climbing, some of the best rock climbing in the region at Carter Rock Recreational Area. We have our canal quarters lock houses where you can stay overnight, and some fabulous historic downtowns in our canal towns, our gateway towns. So what makes recreation at the CNO so popular? Well, we have all those fabulous assets I just spoke about, but besides that, of course, we have proximity to a major metropolitan area. We touch the District of Columbia, so that's a given. We have more recreational visitors than Yosemite or Yellowstone, and that's because they don't have those big cities next to them. But besides that, Rock Creek is in DC, and they're getting half the visitation that we are. And I fight that it's two things. It's connectivity to outdoor recreation networks. Now we're connected into the Great Allegheny Passage. It's a trail going from Cumberland, Maryland, out to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So now you can ride your bike or hike from DC all the way to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 330 miles. We're also connected into the DC Trails Network, and I have to give a shout out to Aaron, wherever he is, as the founding chair of the Capital Trails Coalition that's pushing to increase paved bike trails in the district. So that's one, connectivity. So we're part of something larger than ourselves, so definitely think about how you can connect into existing recreational infrastructure. What trails are near you? What rivers are near you? What navigable streams are near you? Are people already recreating on them? The other one is we're a very low barrier to entry park and recreation source. It takes a ton of money and a ton of time to get out there and do backcountry camping in Yosemite. But to get out on the CNO Canal and hike and bike, it takes virtually nothing. So people are able to come to us very easily. There's also no entrance fees. I know that's not popular for historic sites, but for us, we only charge fees at Great Falls, and that's been a great thing for bringing people in from communities outside of our Potomac base. We also have our canal quarters lock houses, so we're able to have people spend overnight trips without having to camp. So that's a little bit different than a lot of national parks. So I can't talk about our park without showing some pictures. This is our famous Billy Goat Trail on the left, the traverse section, the most popular. We've got biking. We have a free bike loaner program at the Great Falls Visitor Center and at Williamsport, and we've seen this just skyrocket. There are so many people that would like to take up biking or like to try. Maybe they biked as a kid and now they have a kid and they don't have the equipment. And this has allowed people to engage in recreation in the park that might not have otherwise. Camping, I just spoke about our campgrounds. Bike packing, this is the fastest growing recreational activity in our park. So this is people that are doing multi-day trips on the CNO Canal, and this is their way of doing like a through ride of the park. So they'll bike ride all day, and then they'll either stay in the campgrounds, our canal quarters, lock houses, or up in bed and breakfast in the historic towns. And ever since the connection with the Great Allegheny Passage several years back, we've just seen the numbers skyrocketing. And very important to this, our daytime visitors, according to a user survey on the Gap Trail, daytime users are spending about $18 a day. Overnight visitors are spending about $124 a day. And I mean, that's consistent with any tourism practice, but the more you can get people recreating on multi-day trips, the better it'll be. We have all this water access, basically all the Potomac River access in Maryland, up through Allegheny. There's some of my wonderful kids rock climbing. So I wanted to quickly touch on two programs at the CNO that are really bridging recreation and historic preservation. The first, I mentioned a couple times in the presentation already, is our Canal Quarters program. So it's our immersive, self-guided, overnight interpretive program in 6, soon to be 7, of our historic blockhouses, where we've taken them back in time and we tell stories of the canal's history and different eras in each house. And we allow visitors to spend the night, 1 to 3 nights. And we were, to be honest, we were very concerned starting this program, as many of you probably would be, allowing visitors self-guided in your historic structures overnight. And the fact is, people are treating them like museums. They're really respectful. So this has become a real financial success for us, that it provides self-sustaining funding mechanism, not only for the program's operation, but now for the preservation and maintenance of the buildings. It's been a media darling. We've got in the Post and the New York Times and Preservation Magazine. And we're starting to see other national parks calling us, trying to do this concept in their park. So it's working. It provides a hut-to-hut experience for recreational users. What we found is being able to meet them where they are. You know, these recreational users are already out running on this trail or biking on this trail, and lodging was something that they needed to be able to do these bike packing trips. And once we've got them in the building, we're able to give them a deeper national park experience because they have all this interpretation on the walls. They're able to live the life of a lock keeper. Maybe they didn't sign up for it, but they're getting that experience once they're there. So again, I can't not show pretty pictures. So this is Lock House 22. It's down in Potomac. We've taken this one back in time to the 1830s. You can see some of the preservation methods used. And that's how we did the interp. It was really, we interpreted through the furnishings themselves and then just photos on the wall, so it looks like a domestic setting, but you're getting more of the story once you look at those. This is Lock House 10. It's our most popular. This has about a 90% occupancy rate throughout the year. Nice screened-in porch. It's rehab back to the 1930s and tells the story of the Public Works Administration programs that, particularly the Civilian Conservation Corps and their work to restore the canal. There's upstairs, the bathroom. There's our kitchen. If any of you are interested personally, again, I've got coupons up here. Sorry for the sales pitch. The other program that I want to highlight today, Aaron alluded to a couple times. It's our Canal Towns partnership. And this is actually outside the park boundaries in our neighboring gateway communities. It's a regional economic development and marketing partnership connecting our gateway towns in Western Maryland and West Virginia to reap the benefits of those trail-based users. So these 9 towns, including Bolivar, have seen that there are already bicyclists coming off the trail. So they wanted to capitalize on that. You know, these towns originally, they had factories and industry that were supporting the town. That's dwindled over the years, and they're starting to see this resurgence of activity in the downtown through recreational tourism. So some of the things that they've been working on, they've done trail improvement or town improvements to be more recreational friendly. Like Aaron was talking about, putting in those bike racks in front of the businesses, actually recruiting in more recreationally focused businesses, adding on services to existing businesses. There's a cafe in Williamsport that now will also Sherpa your gear from the towpath into your bed and breakfast. So people are getting really creative around the concept. They've developed connections between the towpath and towns, so that's been really important too. Again, giving them that safe, easy direction so that when you're on the towpath, you're seeing signage. Oh, Shepherdstown is just up these staircase. You might not see it from the trail, but it's easy to get to, and there's all these amenities when you get there. One of the other important things that they've been doing is co-marketing. So before, their tourism has been like concentric circles of maybe the town of Brunswick is working through Frederick County and working through a state of Maryland, but now they're seeing marketing all of them together as part of the C&O Canal experience is a much easier lift for them. So they've been putting out brochures highlighting the canal towns as the experience, going on your bike ride and stopping in the towns along the way. So there's a really fantastic resource. If any of you are along Rec Trail, and I assume many of you are because you're sitting in on this session, definitely check out the Great Allegheny Passages Trail Town Guide. It's put out by the Progress Fund. Our Canal Towns program is based on the Trail Towns program from the Great Allegheny Passage, and they're really the best standard out there to look at. So some of the initial steps, if you're lucky enough to be adjacent to or an existing or planned trail or a water trail, is first find your friends. So look for building a coalition with neighboring historic sites, towns, neighborhoods, businesses, also your planners and your elected officials to capitalize on these recreational assets. Number 2 is really important for us. Many of these towns haven't really looked at themselves from the viewpoint of a recreational user. So there's this great tool that the Gap Trail put out that's an asset inventory. It's an 8-page packet that you can go and walk your town, and it'll give you checkpoints for, is this recreationally friendly? How many bike racks do you have? Is it easy to get from the town to the trail and vice versa? Is there a nice gateway so that you're welcomed into town? So we accomplish that, find the gaps, and this will also help you seek funding for the improvements. And then also marketing as a team, the full recreational experience, including the sites and towns. So I just included a couple of resources for you guys. So you'll get these presentations, I'm sure, from Preservation Maryland, but I've got up there the Canal Corridors Program. You can find more information online or just talk to me. The Trail Town Guide, again, I'm going to do a plug for that. It's one of the best resources out there. And then my park, myself, and the Great Allegheny Passage. And with that, I'll hand it off to Charlie.
So thanks. So Aaron and Becky talked about the practicalities of trail development and connections to historic preservation. That's not really my background. I spent 28 years working in Congress. I worked for a Maryland congressman for 6 years and for Senator Sarbanes for 22 years after that. And so my talk is a little bit more about federal policy. What we share in common, though, from what you've heard from both Aaron and Becky, is, and what the trails that they talked about and the connections that they talked about is, both of them have national designations. When I travel around the world, the first place that I look is, what are the national parks? What are the things that have been so recognized by people that you want to go there, you want to experience those areas? And so in my federal policy role, that was sort of the connection that I have always been trying to draw. How to create the federal institutions, the federal parks, the connections, in order to advance this connection to historic preservation. I also want to make another point. First people that I met when I started working in Congress were 2 people. One was a woman named Judy Johnson from Baltimore County who was passionate. She created an organization called the Committee to Preserve Assateague Island. And she was passionate about protecting Assateague Island. The other person I met, actually a group of people, were from Preservation Maryland. And so the only message I want to leave you here is that don't think when you're doing your policy work that doesn't have an influence on people at the congressional level, at the state level. Right now, I serve the 2 other members who are here on the board of the Maryland Historical Trust. So 40 years later, after I started working, I'm still involved in historic preservation, in part because I met people from the preservation community very early on in my career. I'm still involved in creating national parks and national institutions, in part because I met a woman who was just so passionate about the issue and taught me a lot and was one of the mentors in the process. So, the third connection here between Becky and Aaron's speech, the trails that they talk about are located on water bodies, and primarily on water bodies. And there's a distinct water sports and water body connection to recreational activities, and historic preservation. This is one of my favorite pictures in the Chesapeake. It's an evocative cultural landscape that I don't think we focus enough attention on in the preservation community. It's preserving landscapes like this. We talk about historic structures, we talk about historic buildings, but it's really about, for me, it's really about the landscape that you're trying to preserve. Water has been the connection for civilization, for the development of civilization, in every part of the world. It's water for drinking, it's water for food source, it's water for transportation, and that's no less true here in the Chesapeake. When you look, there's over 12,000 miles of shoreline here in the Chesapeake watershed. When John Smith sailed up the Chesapeake more than 400 years ago, it was not only looking for gold that he was looking for water. He was looking for connections. He was looking for those transportation connections all across the Chesapeake, the transportation connections that would get them out west. So again, water has played an important role in this area. At the federal level, you may know this. Back in 1997, when President Clinton was president, they started a program called the American Heritage Rivers Initiative. It's done by executive order. And this was one of the early efforts to try and connect historic preservation, economic development, and natural resource protection. Those were the three goals of what the American Heritage River Initiative were all about. The Potomac River, which flows next to the C&O Canal, was one of the 11 named American Heritage Rivers. And the idea was that we were going to concentrate federal resources to accomplish all these three goals along the Potomac River. Unfortunately, the initiative ran into a lot of objections from certain members of Congress over personal property rights, and changes happened, politics, and the program sort of disappeared over time. But it was really one of those efforts to start bringing federal resources in a concentrated manner across the country to try and bring river protection, river economic development opportunities, economic revitalization of water towns along those rivers, along with protection of the natural resources that are there. Back in 1998, when I worked for Senator Sarbanes, we were building off of that initiative, and we created a program called Chesapeake Bay Gateways and Water Trails. And it was really conceived for the same purpose of doing the same things that the American Heritage River Initiative was doing, but this was specifically for the Chesapeake Bay. This grew out of the National Heritage Area Program. We have a huge Chesapeake Bay watershed. A lot of interest coming from communities throughout this area, having heritage areas created in their states, in their regions. And what this was essentially was a super heritage area program that covered the entire Chesapeake watershed and provided the resources to help local communities actually begin to develop kinds of initiatives that would connect their gateways to communities, that would engage people in the Chesapeake, connect people to the Chesapeake, and again, preserve the historic resources along that. And so, this is an advertisement for the community. It's about seeing America. This is one way to do that advertisement in broader vision. Along comes a gentleman named Pat Noonan. Pat Noonan was chairman of the Nature Conservancy. He was chairman of the Conservation Fund. During the 400th anniversary of the founding of Jamestown, he came up with this idea about creating a water trail, nation's first water trail, following the route of Captain John Smith as he traveled all around the Chesapeake Bay, 3,000 miles. And so this was one of the first national water trails. It was established in 2006. And again, it's this connection about bringing people together. It's connection to John Smith's voyages, to the historic communities where John Smith sailed. It had a lot of consequences over the last 10 years since that's been established. But the interesting thing is that national historic sites such as George Washington's birthplace, one of the outcomes of creating this national trail is that for years, you couldn't access George Washington's birthplace by water. You couldn't access it by water. If you were a paddler in a kayak, in a canoe, or whatever, they wouldn't allow you to land on their beach because it was a national monument. It was a national historic site. And so you couldn't access it. You can only come in by car or bicycle, basically. But one of the things that this opened up was this idea is we have all these national historic sites all around the Chesapeake, and why not access them by water? The same was true for Colonial National Park. This is Jamestown. In order for the shallop, we had a reproduction shallop, John Smith shallop, that sailed all around the Chesapeake during the sesquicentennial, I think that's the way to say it, of John Smith's travels. And the National Park Service wouldn't allow the shallop to land at Jamestown because it was new policy. It was something that they didn't allow at a national historical park. So for the first time since we created the John Smith Trail, we now have a policy and more national parks, more areas that are much more interested in the water access to these areas. We created the Star Spangled Banner National Historic Trail, and you heard earlier about the bicycle trail through Bladensburg and all that area. Again, if you look at this was to trace the Chesapeake campaign of the War of 1812. You'll see a lot of geography on this map is very similar to the geography on the map of the John Smith Trail. You know, they connected to the waters. This is both a land trail and a water trail, but it's very similar real estate that's involved here. But again, it's another connection between a historic event, historic communities that have a history going back to the War of 1812, and a water trail, water engagement, recreation. 2011, Secretary Salazar decided to create this America's Great Outdoors Initiative, all of which had very similar goals. It was really to connect communities and facilitate recreational access, and as well as for historic preservation. One of the things that the other connection here is that what you see is a commonality between what Aaron talked about and what Becky talked about is exercise. A large part of what drives people to historic areas and bicycling to all those activities is also about the exercise connection. Paddle sports is now one of the fastest growing areas of recreation. You can see, there's also the economic dimensions of that as well. Now, when we talk about water sports, there are certain water sports that are probably incompatible with historic preservation. Wakeboarding, there's probably people, as I demonstrated over there, who probably don't see the difference in that connection, we don't. I sort of don't consider that to be the kind of water sports that is compatible in this area. Our latest initiative right now, going back to what I talked about earlier, about national designations and the importance of national designation, is to create a national marine sanctuary in this area of the Potomac River known as Mallows Bay. About 5 years ago, we started down this path of designating a new a new national marine sanctuary. For the first time, there's about 15 of these national marine sanctuaries all around the country. There's not a single one in the Chesapeake region. These are economic engines for the communities that they're located in. They're connections for people to the natural resources on the water in those areas. We have in Maryland this fantastic site, the largest concentration of historic shipwrecks anywhere in the Western Hemisphere. These are primarily shipwrecks from World War I, over 100 vessels that were built. These were the Liberty ships of World War I. There are wooden steamships that were built in 27 shipyards all across the country. And they were built for America's entry into World War I because we needed the ships to supply the war. The German U-boats were sinking ships faster than countries could build them, and when America entered the war, our responsibility was going to build Liberty ships that were going to carry the troops, that were going to carry the supplies overseas. And so there was this massive national effort to create ships, plan for over 1,000 ships, a massive propaganda campaign that came along with that, all for 1,000 ships to be created. This was in April. And so you had everybody working towards this goal. Major jobs program that was created out of this. In July of this year, we'll be celebrating the 100th anniversary of the launch of almost 100 ships. And this is what you see. That's the ships that are currently in Mallows Bay. That's the remains of the ships that were there. Major shipbreaking operations occurred later on to salvage some of these ships for a World War II effort. And this is an aerial view of the ships of what you would see in the water today. This is the Benzonia. This was burned down recently, so it doesn't quite look the same, but this was the flagship of the area. It's just a gorgeous area. These are some of the ships that are located there as well that don't date back to World War I. And I'm just going to sort of go through this. In the area where the Marine Sanctuary is located is the greatest steamboat disaster that ever happened in Maryland history. 74 people died from the fire that happened here, of a Confederate barge in the area. But it's in the area of a fantastically beautiful landscape that has been largely protected over the years, and protected by federal policies, by state policies. It's heron rookeries. It's got lots of animals located here. It's got an incredible cultural heritage associated with it, fishing heritage. And in 2015, we made this area a National Historic District. It's modeled, our efforts are modeled on an initiative that happened at Thunder Bay in Wisconsin, in Michigan, sorry. And this has become a huge economic boom to the area. We've had oral histories developing out of that. We've had this great water sports connection. You can see the John Smith Trail, Star Spangled Banner Trail, the Potomac Heritage Trail, all are in the same area, so numerous opportunities for engagement in the history of this area. Paddlers are flocking to the area. We now have virtual tours happening here. We have, well, I'll just skip over this one, but a lot of trail, we've now created paddlers' guides to this area so people can experience the area. And the local community has created this very, very creative Get Wrecked campaign. And it's really been a boon to getting people out there. And we've got education groups. The Black Divers Association has come out there and is leading efforts to engage some of the students at some of the poverty schools and poorer schools in the district to engage them in diving opportunities in this area. We've had national and international coverage on this effort. But again, I just want to conclude very briefly. It really is about bringing history to life, and it's this experience with the water. It's the opportunity to engage people in some fashion. It's the opportunity to preserve the landscapes that are such a critical part of our history that this initiative is all about, and what all those other initiatives that I talked about earlier are about. So thank you.